Welcome back, everyone. I'm attorney Craig Steger, the host of this YouTube channel. Today, I wanted to talk about subrogation, or is your insurance company stealing your settlement? But before I do so, I want to remind you, as it's displayed on the screen, this live stream is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Viewing or participating in this live stream does not create an attorney-client relationship. So always talk to an attorney in whatever state or jurisdiction you're in for any specific legal questions that you have. So now that I got that out of the way, I want to talk about subrogation. So what is subrogation? Subrogation is a term you may have never heard about and may hopefully never have to hear about, but when it comes up, it is sort of it's a confusing topic, and I have clients oftentimes that have questions about it. So let me kind of break down what subrogation is, why it exists, and kind of some of the basic nuances of it, so that if you or a loved one is involved in a case where you injured in a car accident or something and you have to bring a personal injury claim, you're probably going to have to deal with this concept of subrogation. So basically what happens with subrogation is this. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose you're involved in a car accident. You're on your way to work. Actually, let me give you a little better example. You're working, and on your way to a job site for your employer, you get involved in a car accident. Wasn't your fault. Someone else pulled out in front of you, caused the crash, entirely their fault. And let's say you get injured. You have to take an ambulance and go visit the hospital. They do some x-rays. Maybe you've got broken bones, maybe you don't. But regardless, you had to have medical care because of this crash that wasn't your fault. Okay, who pays those medical bills? Well, if in this particular situation, it may be one of two or maybe more sources, because you are working. Actually, it could be three or four. So as I think about it, if you're on the clock and you're working, depending on the state you're in, you may have a workers' compensation claim, and workers' compensation insurance may actually pay those medical bills if you're within the course of employment. Again, that'll depend on the state that you're in. You may also have your medical bills paid by health insurance. So if you have health insurance, your health insurance company may very well be paying some or all of your medical bills. If you're Medicare eligible, Medicare may be paying those medical bills. You probably, if you're in a car that has insurance, you may have MedPay, which is sort of a small no-fault insurance coverage that pays for medical expenses if someone's involved in a crash, even if it is their fault. In this case, wasn't your fault, but either way, your auto insurance policy may pay. Usually it's a small amount, maybe $500, maybe $1,000. Maybe on better policies, it's a few $1,000s or even more than that. And it's just there to kind of cover medical expenses, sort of those immediate medical expenses, ambulance rides, ER visits, x-rays, MRIs, things like that. So that's kind of a very, very common situation if someone is involved in a car crash or work injury or something like that. But let's just say it's a car crash. So let's say that all happens, and then whether you hire an attorney or not, at some point down the road, let's say your claim gets settled. You negotiate, or you hire an attorney and they negotiate a settlement with the insurance company. And let's say let's say the car that caused the crash had $25,000 in liability limits. That's the entirety of their insurance limits. And let's say you have $10,000 in medical bills. That's ambulance ride, ER visit, maybe a short hospitalization. Maybe you had a broken bone and they had to do surgery on it, that kind of stuff. So let's say the insurance company for the car that actually caused the crash pays its $25,000 policy limits. What happens to that $25,000? Does it all go to the person that was injured? Probably not. If they hired an attorney, the attorney most likely is doing it on a contingency fee basis, so they're going to get a percentage of that. Maybe it's a third, maybe it's more, maybe it's less, but it's going to be a percentage of that. That settlement is going to go to attorney's fees. Um, One of the things that gets taken out of most settlements, not all, but most settlements, is what's called a subrogation interest. Subrogation means that any provider, any insurance company, typically could be health insurance, could be workers' compensation, could be auto insurance, disability insurance. It pays for losses, medical expenses, lost earnings, whatever the case may be, because someone was injured as a result of someone else's fault, has the potential claim for reimbursement for that. And that's called subrogation. It's a right of reimbursement, because they, in essence, have paid out damages, paid out benefits that were caused by someone else's fault who had liability insurance, and that's subrogation. One of the reasons, at least the reason that's given, is to prevent the injured person from getting a double recovery. So when a claim is made for injuries, included within that claim are going to be the cost of medical expenses, right? Let's say your insurance paid $10,000 for medical bills, and that's how much you're claiming. Again, that's what your claim is against the insurance company for the person that caused the crash. Well, you didn't actually have to pay for those medical expenses because insurance paid for it. And so you, in essence, got those medical expenses paid for free, although in reality they weren't free because you may have paid health insurance. It was a perk through work, whatever the case may be. But for purposes of the legal analysis, it's sort of viewed, well, you got those expenses were already paid for. So you got the medical bills, you got the medical care, someone else paid for it. Now you're going to get $10,000 in your settlement for those medical expenses. It's a double recovery. At least that's the theory. If we allow you to keep that money, one of the reasons why subrogation exists is the idea is that it can help reduce the cost of health insurance and other kinds of insurance, especially health insurance, because it's the idea is being if the health insurance company can get some of that money back, that should reduce premiums overall for everyone. So that's the theory of subrogation. It means that that these insurance companies could be Medicare, Medicaid, auto insurance, MedPay, health insurance, workers' compensation. That if you get your case settled, they get they get repaid at least some of their money back. Now, there are some situations where they actually don't get their money back or don't get all of their money back. Um, for example, Medicare and Medicaid, especially Medicare, there are specific statutes and regulations that deal with the subrogation interest of Medicare, as you can imagine. There's specific rules that everyone's required to follow. Medicare has this formula where if they've paid out money for someone's injuries and they settle the case, they have this formula whereby they take a part of their claim. They understand that part of that that goes to the attorney because the person had to hire an attorney, and also part of it is shared by the insured or the plaintiff, whoever was injured. And so with Medicare, there's this whole formula that everyone has to follow. In certain types of health plans, and this is really for like large health plans, we call them ERISA type plans. That's just a fancy acronym for basically for federal regulated health plans. Places like Walmart and other big corporations are so large that they basically self-fund their own employees' health and health benefits. It's cheaper for them to just pool that money and pay to work out their own deals. They're so large they can negotiate their own deals with hospitals and providers that they don't need to go out and purchase health insurance. And so, um, one of the benefits to them is they are not subject to what's called the made whole rule. What's the made whole rule? The made whole rule is sort of an old common law rule that most states have had or still have, which basically says this: if someone's injured in a crash and they pursue a claim and they get money from the liable party that caused it, if whatever they recovered from the other side is inadequate to fully compensate the plaintiff, the any subrogated party whose interest is sort of a step removed gets nothing unless it fully makes whole the damages of the injured person. The idea being, if anyone is going to have to take less than they deserve fully, it should be the insurance companies, not the injured people themselves who paid for these benefits, right? And so the made whole rule is something that gives injured people and their lawyers a fair amount of leverage over insurance companies to try and get them to negotiate their liens down, their subrogation liens down when it comes time to settle the case, because you can tell them, look, you may not get any money back if the court finds that you're not made whole or that my client wasn't made whole. So here's 10 cents on the dollar or 20 cents on the dollar, take it or leave it. It's the best deal you're going to get. And you have a fair amount of leverage over those companies. The ERISA stuff more or less excludes or exempts certain types of health plans from those rules, and they say, no, no, we're not subject to that. If we paid out $10,000, we get $10,000 back, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't leave any money for the plaintiff. That's an extreme reading, but there are plans or health plans that have that language, and they may be enforceable. So that's kind of subrogation in a nutshell. Other thing I will say about subrogation is workers' compensation, because I mentioned that in this example. Here in Wisconsin, at least, similar to Medicare, has this very specific statutory formula, kind of like the Medicare one, so that if someone is injured that they cover, like I said, someone who's working in the course of their employment gets involved in a car accident, and there's another driver out there that owes them money, they have a specific statute that more or less divides things up by a third so that they don't get more than the injured person does. And so that's by statute. Again, kind of like with the Medicare rules, you really can't get around it. You're sort of stuck with that, I think, in most situations. Um, Another common one is if people go on disability, short-term or long-term disability. Usually, those plans have very, very what I would say unfair from the standpoint of the policyholder um, premium reimbursements and benefit reimbursement if they recover, if that person recovers money. And so you have to be really careful. If you go on disability, if you get disability insurance, just realize that you may have to pay them back, and or your benefits may stop if you receive like a personal injury settlement or something like that. Something to keep in mind. Medicare and Medicaid are not really subject to the made whole rule. Like I said, they're just kind of they're regulated. They're their own sort of system regulated by the federal government, and so everyone is kind of stuck with those rules. Um, so a few questions of people that may have about this. And if you're watching this video at a later date and you have questions, feel free to leave a comment. I'll do my best to answer them. Um, so one question is, can the insurance company basically take the entire settlement check? Generally speaking, not. Um, Generally speaking, not. Although ERISA plans at least argue that they're not subject to that. So that's something to keep in mind. That's why it's really important to know what kind of health plan it is. Um, so that's one common question. Another question people have is, what if I don't want to pay back my health insurer? Um, you may not have a choice, and they can intervene in the lawsuit and demand that they get repaid if they find out that you have recovered money. And if you settle the case without telling them, especially like Medicare, that's a big no-no. They can come after you then, so you don't want to do that. Medicare, for example, could withhold future benefits if you stiff them, if you try and stiff them. And they got some other hammers they can use. So you don't mess around with Medicare. You got a Medicare subrogation interest, your attorney better darn well make sure that they take care of that before the settlement funds are dispersed. Subrogation is very much dependent on state rule, subject, of course, to ERISA and some of the federal rules that are going to preempt that. Let me look here. Uh, One question I've seen is subrogation ever waived? I have not. The one situation where I have seen subrogation rights sometimes waived, and this is included. Generally, it's going to be included in the insurance policy documents, the language of the policy itself. Is if someone is injured in malpractice. So if someone goes to the doctor and gets, is a victim of malpractice, and they pursue a medical malpractice claim, somewhat surprisingly, some insurance companies will waive their right to subrogation in those cases if the reason why someone's got medical care was because of doctor negligence. Now, there may also be some very strategic reasons for that they don't want to be involved in lawsuits against doctors and hospitals and stuff like that. But that's an example of where I've seen subrogation rights waived. One interesting situation that I've had that I've sort of seen this develop over time as laws come out, cases come out, and then the insurance companies try to kind of cover their bases, is sometimes you have subrogation rights against other parties, against insurance companies that are kind of similarly situated. For example, let's say let's go back to the example I had before. Let's say you're driving your car and someone causes a crash and you get injured. Their fault. Let's say you weren't driving for your employer, you were on your way to work. But the person that hit you um, doesn't have insurance. There's no insurance on their vehicle, right? So you get involved in a crash, you're injured, your health insurance, say your health insurance pays your medical bills, and then you go and pursue what's called an underinsured, or actually an uninsured motorist claim, right? Uninsured is a claim against your own auto insurance because the driver that actually caused the crash doesn't have insurance, or maybe didn't have enough insurance, and now you have an underinsured claim. That is insurance that you purchase, or whoever owned the vehicle, whoever insured the vehicle, purchases for your benefit if someone is injured because another driver didn't have enough insurance. A dispute that I've been in with a number of times in the past is, does the health insurance company that paid medical bills, are they entitled to subrogation against underinsured or uninsured motorist benefits? In the past, for many years, they did not, because the courts viewed uninsured insurance as something that's not actually insurance covering the legally responsible party. It's not liability insurance. It's insurance that the injured person is covered, and that is not the type of source that subrogated parties are entitled to tap into. More and more, I've seen insurance companies specifically writing and changing their insurance policies to make it clear that they are going to seek subrogation even against uninsured and underinsured motorist claims. And it used to be a lot of times the policies were written that you could just argue based only on the policy language. You that the health insurance plan or whatever else didn't have a subrogation right against uninsured and underinsured insurance companies. That's more or less been changed because they've figured it out and they've just rewritten their policies to include that. Now, that may or may not apply if the made whole rule applies or something like that. Some state statute may override that, but that's something that the insurance companies have tried to do to get around bad cases. So you see this kind of constant evolution as scenarios come up, decisions are made, a court of appeals or Supreme Court for a state issues a decision that sort of shafts the insurance company, and then the insurance company is like, well, we can't let that happen again. Let's rewrite our policy for the future. And so that is something that I have sort of seen play out over the course of my career. Um, One thing to keep in mind is if there is a settlement, generally speaking, there is some room for negotiation, even if their insurance policy says we get dollar for dollar, we get totally recovered. If the made whole rule may apply, you have some negotiating power. But if the party that's seeking subrogation is Medicare or workers' compensation, and you're in a state that has specific statutes dealing with that kind of reimbursement, the leverage isn't so much. The negotiation doesn't really happen. You're kind of stuck with that. So it depends a great deal on the state that someone's in, and also the type of health insurance uh, or the type of entity it is that has the subrogation claim. Oh, let's see here. I think that's everything I wanted to cover on this. If people have questions about subrogation specifically, let me know. But it's something, subrogation is one of those things that most people don't know what it's about. And a lot of times lawyers are not very good at explaining that early on in the process. And it's really only at the end of the case when, let's say, a settlement is reached, and then you start to break it down. People can sometimes be very surprised. Okay. The purpose of this video is to help people not be surprised when that happens. And this is the type of video that you want to see, or you want your lawyer to share with you well in advance. So when a case gets settled and the subrogation interest had to be taken care of, you know what they're talking about. So anyway, thank you, those that are in the comments section commenting. I appreciate it. I should be back live again tomorrow. Most weeks I'll be here at 4:30 p.m. Central Time, live streaming for 30 minutes. I usually have a topic at hand, but I'll take any questions that people have at that time. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. If anyone has additional questions about subrogation, feel free to leave a comment or get a hold of me, and I'll either answer the question in a comment, or if it needs more, maybe I'll do another video on it. So, okay. Thanks everyone for watching. And until next time, everyone, have a good one.